Hey guys, this is Pastor Willie, and this is a leadership training video. The topic is prayer, and the title is 3 Prayers You Must Pray. 3 prayers that a leader, whether it's a leader of a group, a leader of a church, a leader of a ministry, 3 prayers you must pray. Now, the Bible is a book of theology, but it's also a book that gives us a way to do things. It gives us structure. It gives us strategies, especially. Sometimes the strategies are adjusted to different contexts, but the basic strategy remains the same. And the ministry of Jesus, he demonstrates the strategy. The book of Acts is showing how they implemented Jesus's strategy. And you notice the first thing as you read the book of Acts or the ministry of Jesus, you notice that it's saturated with prayer. And specifically, it's saturated with 3 basic prayers. And these are the 3 basic prayers that a leader must pray, that a pastor must pray, that a leader of a cell group or a community group must pray, that a leader of a ministry must pray. So I'm going to give you those 3 prayers that a leader must pray. Prayer number 1 is the prayer for people to be called to go into the harvest field. Let me say that again. Prayer number 1 is a prayer for people to be called to go into the harvest field. Matthew 9, verse 7, Jesus gathered his disciples together and he said to them, "The harvest is great, but the workers are few. Therefore, ask the Lord of the harvest, God, to send workers into his harvest field." The harvest is the souls of people who are lost. It's great, Jesus said. The problem is not the harvest. We don't have to pray for the harvest. We don't have to pray, God, that let there be a harvest. There is a harvest. That's settled. We don't have to pray for even for people to be saved. That's God's desire that people be saved. The issue is nobody is going out into the harvest field. Nobody is going out of the church, out of the cell group, out of the community group, out of the ministry into the area where lost people are. People are ready to receive Jesus, but nobody is going to reach them. So the focus of prayer is that God would send workers out. So if you're leading a cell group, a community group, you pray as the leader, God, send the people in my group out to reach their friends, their network. As a pastor, you pray, God, send the people in the congregation out. If you're a leader of a children's ministry or a teacher of a children's class, God, I pray that the parents and the children would reach their friends. So prayer number 1, praying that people will be called into the harvest field. Prayer number 2 is that people would answer the call. Makes sense. You pray that God would call them to the harvest, so that they have that feeling inside. I need to go and reach people. I need to go and reach my co-workers. They get that feeling. And then the second prayer is to pray that they would answer that call from God. In Acts 13, verse 2 and 3 is a great example. And notice prayer again. While they were worshiping and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, "Set apart Barnabas and Saul to the work I have called them." Then they laid hands on them, and with prayer and fasting, they committed them to the work to which they had been called. The key here is they're answering the call. The Holy Spirit says, set apart these 2 guys to the work I've called them to. And they said yes. They went out. Paul and Barnabas went out into the harvest field. They answered the call. With prayer and fasting, they laid hands on them and sent them out. So prayer number one is that people would be called. They would realize, I'm called into the harvest. It's not just the pastor. And then prayer number two is that when they're called, they would answer the call and go into the harvest. And when that happens, when people go into the harvest, you're going to need prayer number three, because things are going to happen, because the harvest is plentiful. Once we go out into the harvest, whether it's the members of a cell group, a community group, the group is going to start growing. Or it's the members of a church, the church is going to start growing. Or a children's ministry, you're going to have more children than you could even deal with, because people have gone out into the harvest field. The harvest is great, remember. So that leads to prayer number three. Just a quick review. Prayer number one, praying for people to go out into the harvest field, to reach lost people. Prayer number two, praying that people would answer the call and go out into the harvest field. Prayer number three is that new leaders would be developed and empowered. In Acts 14:23, it says, Barnabas and Saul appointed elders for them in each of the churches, and with prayer and fasting, there it is again, prayer and fasting, they committed them to the Lord in whom they had put their trust. As the harvest is harvested, as people are reached with the good news of Jesus Christ, more and more leaders need to be raised up. More and more leaders need to be empowered. And Paul and Barnabas did just that. They empowered people, they trained people, and then they released them. You get that? They appointed them elders of the different groups, of the different churches, and they moved on. And there was multiplication. So those are three prayers you must pray. You don't have to pray them. You can just stick with your normal little group that will never grow and eventually die, the church that will eventually die, the ministry that will not have any impact. You can do that. But if you don't want to do that, and I'm praying you don't want to do that, I'm praying you want to see a harvest, then there are three prayers you must pray. Prayer number one, for people to be called into the harvest field. For prayer number two, for people to answer the call and go out and reach other people. Prayer number three, for new leaders to be developed and empowered. So begin praying these three prayers. Write them down. I have them written down in a book, a prayer book that I use when I pray. Begin praying, and you know what will happen? The first thing that will happen is it'll become a cry of your heart. Maybe it'll just be repeating words at the beginning, but as you continue to pray it and read over the scriptures, God will give you that burden, and you'll start praying from your heart. The harvest of lost people is plentiful. All around us, people need Jesus. Children, men, women, everywhere. But nobody's going out. So start with these three prayers from your heart. Now, I'd love to hear what you have to think. Leave me a comment below. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, so I'll be putting up more videos to help you in your leadership and in your walk with Jesus. God bless you as you pray those three prayers. Take care.